Picture yourself standing in the shadowed halls of a Tudor palace, where the air is thick with the scent of decay and the whispers of fear. You've heard of Henry VIII, the king with 6 wives, the man who broke England from Rome to forge the Church of England. But let me, an independent historian who chases the truths buried beneath polite narratives, guide you through a story far darker than any textbook dares to tell. This isn't the tale of a charismatic monarch. It's the grotesque saga of a man whose body and mind rotted while he wielded absolute power. A ruler whose paranoia poisoned a kingdom, and whose death unleashed chaos that defied the grave itself. Let's step into the horror that was Henry VIII's life, not as distant readers, but as witnesses to a reality that makes fiction tremble. By the 1540s, the Henry VIII, who once dazzled Europe, tall, athletic, a Renaissance prince who could out-tride and out-charm any rival, was gone. In his place was a grotesque figure, a king whose body had become a prison of flesh. His waist measured a staggering 54 inches, wider than most men were tall. He weighed nearly 400 pounds in an era when the average man was perhaps 140. This wasn't mere excess. It was a body in full revolt. His legs, once powerful enough for days of hunting, were now marred by festering ulcers, open wounds that oozed pus and rotted flesh, refusing to heal, despite the frantic efforts of his physicians. The stench was so vile that courtiers pressed perfumed handkerchiefs to their faces, and some swore the smell carried across entire rooms. Servants drew straws to decide who would endure the grim task of dressing the king, for tending to those wounds was a punishment no one volunteered for. But this was no ordinary decline. In 1536, Henry suffered a jousting accident so severe he lay unconscious for 2 hours, a near-death event by medieval standards. Modern medical minds suggest this caused a traumatic brain injury, one that rewrote his very soul. The young king who composed music and debated theology morphed into a paranoid tyrant, his temper flaring at imagined slights, his once sharp mind clouded by rage. Some believe he also suffered from Cushing's syndrome, a condition that could explain his explosive weight gain, his wild mood swings, and those relentless leg ulcers. Yet, to speak of the king's frailty was to invite death. His doctors, cowed by his claim to divine rule, stayed silent, knowing that diagnosing the king's illness could be branded treason. So they watched as he swelled, rotted, and raged, their fear as palpable as the stench. Henry's physical decay mirrored his reign, grandiose, chaotic, and teetering on ruin. By his final years, he could scarcely move. Servants hauled him from room to room in specially crafted chairs rigged with pulleys and wheels, yet even this was a struggle. His incontinence was an open secret. Attendants carried portable commodes everywhere, for the king who ordered executions with a glance couldn't master his own body. The court, meant to be a stage for his majesty, became a grotesque theater where his decay was impossible to ignore. Yet no one dared acknowledge it. To admit the king's mortality was to risk everything, so they bowed, smiled, and swallowed their nausea. This was Henry VIII, not the bold figure of portraits, but a man betrayed by his own flesh, his wounds a daily mockery of his power. As we linger on this image of a king unraveling, consider the women who shared his life, for their fates were bound to his in ways far crueler than history's tidy summaries suggest. Let's walk through their stories, because they reveal a man whose heart was as rotten as his body. The 6 wives of Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, Catherine Parr, are often reduced to a rhyme. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. But their lives were no mere sequence. They were a crucible of terror, shaped by a king whose love was as lethal as his wrath. Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess who bore Henry's daughter Mary, was a woman of unshakable faith. Yet when she failed to produce a male heir, Henry didn't just discard her, he destroyed her. Banished to damp, remote castles, forbidden from seeing her daughter, she lived under virtual house arrest, her spirit battered by rumors that she was mad. Her final years were spent writing unanswered letters to a husband who had moved on, and some whisper her death was hastened by poison, a quiet end to a woman who dared to defy him. Anne Boleyn, the firebrand who sparked England's break with Rome, met a fate even more horrific. When Henry grew weary of her, again, for lacking a son, he didn't simply divorce her. He wove a grotesque tapestry of lies, accusing her of adultery with multiple men, including her own brother. Her musician, tortured into confessing a fabricated affair, sealed her doom. Anne was forced to watch as 5 men, her brother among them, were executed for these invented crimes, knowing her own death loomed. The psychological agony of standing there, betrayed by the man who once reshaped a kingdom for her, is almost unthinkable. Catherine Howard, a mere teenager when she wed the aging king, faced his jealousy head-on. When whispers of her past relationships reached Henry, liaisons from before she ever met him, he didn't stop at execution. He crafted a law declaring it treason for any woman to marry the king without bearing her sexual history, a vindictive jab at a girl who couldn't have anticipated his rage. Her death was swift, but the months of alternating affection and threats must have been a living nightmare. Anne of Cleves, deemed unappealing by Henry, escaped with her life but not her pride, coerced into an annulment, and forced to thank him for sparing her. Jane Seymour, who gave Henry his longed-for son, died from childbirth complications, yet Henry was already eyeing her successor before her grave was dug. Catherine Parr, the final wife, survived by outliving him, navigating his volatile moods with a diplomat's precision. These women weren't just political pawns, they were prisoners of a man who wielded affection like a weapon. He'd shower them with gifts one day, threaten them the next, keeping them in constant dread. Escape was impossible, divorce wasn't a choice, fleeing meant death, and resistance could doom their families. Their suffering wasn't a footnote, it was the human cost of Henry's ego, a testament to a king who treated love as a battlefield. But his excesses didn't end with his wives. They spilled into every aspect of his life, especially his table. If the torment of Henry's wives shocks you, let's turn to his appetite, because his relationship with food was as extravagant as his cruelty. This wasn't a king who savored his meals. He consumed them as if challenging the kingdom's very resources. Imagine a dining hall where tables buckle under roasted pigs, whole chickens, heaping platters of fish, and endless loaves of bread, all washed down with wine that could fill a moat. Henry devoured roughly 5,000 calories daily, double an active man's needs, and this was a man who, by his later years, could barely shuffle across a room. His kitchen, staffed by over 200 souls, churned out more than 800 dishes each day, with Henry sampling dozens in a single sitting. This wasn't dining, it was a ritual of excess. Yet the quantity was only part of the madness. Henry's meals were steeped in superstition. He believed swans bestowed grace, deer enhanced hunting skill, and oysters boosted virility, so he gorged on them, chasing mythical powers as his health collapsed. Every morsel was tested by multiple tasters, who waited 30 minutes to ensure no poison lingered, a paranoia that turned eating into a spectacle. Meals stretched for hours, a courtly audience watching in strained silence as the king plowed through food enough for a village. He banned common foods like turnips and barley, deeming them beneath his crown, opting instead for meat and sugar that ravaged his body. His ulcers, his immobility, his decay, all traced back to this gluttony, yet he ate more, as if his royal blood could defy nature's laws. This delusion wasn't just personal. It was a mirror of his reign, a belief that power could bend reality. His court played along, praising his feasts while ignoring the toll, just as they ignored his rotting legs. But this excess was only one thread in the tapestry of his rule, for his paranoia wove a far darker pattern. Henry's paranoia wasn't a fleeting fear. It was a tidal wave that drowned his kingdom in suspicion. This wasn't the prudent caution of a ruler. It was an obsession that turned his court into a labyrinth of dread. By his final years, Henry saw treachery in every shadow: friends, allies, even his own children. He slept with crossbows by his bed, daggers under his pillow, and guards watching him through the night. His palaces bristled with secret passages, not for intrigue, but for escape from imagined killers. Peepholes and hidden listening devices let him spy on his courtiers, his trust eroded by his own delusions. He built a spy network so twisted it fed on itself. Informants watched informants, creating a court where no one knew who to trust. A careless word could mean the tower, and Henry's paranoia grew so wild he'd execute people for crimes they hadn't committed, spurred by dreams or rumors of future betrayal. His daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, lived under surveillance, treated as threats in their own home. Meals were a fortress of fear, kitchens sealed, ingredients tested, every step guarded as if poison lurked in the salt. Eating became a military drill, a reflection of a king who saw death in every bite. This wasn't just a man afraid. It was a king who crafted a surveillance state that would shame modern tyrants. His court became a place of betrayal, where nobles snitched on rivals, servants sold out masters, and all lived in terror of Henry's whims. His paranoia wasn't just his own. It infected everyone, a plague of fear that outlasted his life. And when that life ended, the chaos didn't stop. Henry's death should have closed the curtain on his horrors, but even his corpse demanded an encore. In his final weeks, he was a grotesque spectacle, too massive to walk, carried on a wheeled chair as his leg ulcers shed rotting flesh, trailed by servants with cloths to mop the floor. His body, bloated and taut from decay, reeked so fiercely that doctors fled to retch. When he died, no one wanted to approach the corpse to confirm it. So horrific was its state. His coffin, wrapped in lead and sealed in wood, was meant to contain the ruin. It failed. During the funeral procession from London to Windsor, gases from his decomposing body burst the coffin, spilling royal remains across the hearse. Servants scrambled with buckets to clean the mess, while whispers spread of dogs licking the king's leaked fluids from the road. A humiliating end for a man who claimed divine right. His burial was no smoother. The grave collapsed under the coffin's weight, and for years his tomb emitted strange noises and smells, likely from escaping gases. Even in death, Henry sowed chaos. Some servants who handled his body died soon after, perhaps from infections caught from his corpse. This wasn't a king's quiet end. It was a final act of destruction from a man whose life was a symphony of excess, fear, and betrayal. His legacy isn't just the Church of England or his wives. It's a warning of what unchecked power does to a man, a kingdom, and even the grave. So, what do you think of this Henry VIII? A monarch, a monster, or something beyond both? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if these hidden truths shook what you thought you knew about history, hit that subscribe button for more stories the textbooks won't touch. Trust me, there's plenty more darkness to uncover.